All right, so tonight we're going to start with a few Proverbs, but before we read any of the text yet, I thought it might be good to just discuss a little bit about what we mean by righteousness, because that's going to help as we're reading these passages. Obviously, we're going to see some information in the text that we'll be able to take hold of to help us get an idea of what we mean. But if I just asked, what is righteousness, we would hopefully have some sort of answer. So let's make it open-ended. Any thoughts on what exactly do we mean by righteous? To be right. If you actually do a search for this definition, it's very short. I'm going to actually have Ramon pull it up and read what Google says, because this is what I do with my students. All right, guys, what's a circle? Circular. Okay, that's not going to be very helpful for us. So let's go ahead and see what Google has to say. What's it say there, Ramon? Divine or ethical standard. So it actually has that in the definition on Google. Oh, that's the AI one, not the straight. Okay. The one I looked up said something like morally right and justified. It was very short. And of course, justified against what? That implies a standard, right? Something to measure against. So obviously, what righteousness will mean different things to different people. If you are religious, as we are, we're Christians, we're going to use obviously a lot of what we read in our text to help us determine what is righteous. But we will also use this word outside of, church or church practices and things that we do together. We'll use it with colleagues or people we work with occasionally. And so it's good to have an idea of what we might describe. Morality, of course, is different for different people. We're going to read some passages here, and I would say we would probably agree righteousness for us is going to be mostly based on what we have here in the text. If we come across something that differs significantly, it's going to be harder for us to accept that in many cases. So we need definitions. So I'm going to read a chunk of the first chapter of Proverbs. Some of these Proverbs are short and pithy. A couple of the passages are going to be larger chunks. I'm going to start with those. I'm going to read Proverbs 1, 8 through 19, which is kind of a little introduction and a warning for things that the reader might come across. But I think it's important that it's here in this, collection of wisdom. Wisdom can help us discern what is right or righteous, because we won't always agree on that. And we're going to run into, people in the world that might disagree significantly with what we might think is okay or right. All right, so let's go ahead and read through Proverbs 1, 8 through 19. And I might ask a few others to do some readings as well. I'm going to start here. This is a kind of a warning against the enticement of wickedness or sinners here. So, hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without reason, like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot among us, and we will have all one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. So this is a relatively lengthy passage, all kind of focused on righteousness, but perhaps not in the way we might think. What could we take away from this? What is the concern here for the father speaking to his son?
Stay away from hoodlums, gangsters.
Is it easy for us as Christians or just humans to be easily enticed by peers or things that we see in the world? Yeah. So, I deal with teenagers, so I'm going to use some stories of them. I was told I was extra today. I don't know if you're familiar with what that means in current. I am very precise with my language, and I often correct inaccurate language. And so I was told I was extra for this in particular, but it did give me an opportunity to discuss a little bit about why I choose to be so precise with it. It prevents mistakes, it prevents misunderstandings, which if you're dealing with complex diagrams and figures like we do in geometry, then it's easy to make those mistakes. So fortunately, by the time we were done, the student understood. This set of instruction is kind of similar. Like, the father has lived longer than his son. He has seen what befalls those who fall into the trap of quick gain, unjust gain, it mentions at the very end, right? Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It's not a problem with gain, but unjust gain implies something. What does it imply? What could it imply? Probably, wrongful, potentially sinful, right? If we are, obviously you steal something, that's obviously wrong. But you could manipulate, there's lots of other things that might be on the, the fence. We talk about righteousness sometimes as if it's all black and white. That's probably not always, yeah. Sure. All marketing, right? To some extent, you want to entice the person to purchase or to whatever it is that you want them to do. Maybe just give them your attention. I want your eyeballs. Please look at this. Obviously, clickbait and things like that are a big part of the things we deal with today. So yeah, there's lots of things that occur that might not always be black and white. Just to give a little example, I had something this week that came up that was a little fuzzy. I had a student message me outside of class because she knew she was going to be presenting something. I'm going through basically everybody on the roster in each class. They're having to present one question from a review packet. And she wanted me to call her by a name different than what I've been calling her. And so you may not be familiar with this. There was a recent law passed where I'm not really supposed to do that. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to previous issues where I guess there had been some grooming types things that have occurred where students had been previously encouraged to change their name or their gender or something unbeknownst to the parents, and then lo and behold the parents would discover this. And so a law was passed that basically said you cannot call a student by a different name without express permission from the parent. And so I have to decide now whether or not to quickly make a phone call to the parent. Again, I didn't ask for that, and that did happen. There were teachers, apparently, I didn't know about this, but that were doing that sort of thing. So I have to decide now, Do I need to make that call right now to make sure before I actually say, it's a very simple thing. She just wants to be called by, a name. It's not something I'm going to use very often. But that's kind of a great, I'm not sure, wasn't sure exactly what to do. Do I need to get the phone up and just immediately make that call? The law says that I'm supposed to. So there are some of these things that are not super black and white in terms of sometimes what we're supposed to do in certain situations. Anybody have a similar kind of thing that they want to mention about where it might be fuzzy about what is exactly right? Okay, well, I'm going to switch to a couple other passages. There's quite a few I want to get to. Again, this one that we just read, 8 through 19, was really more of an introduction or a warning against the falling away from righteousness. What could happen? And there were several warnings there. And of course, at the end, it takes away the life of its possessors. It doesn't usually yield beneficial, long-term benefit. I've often counseled, people, including, some of my students, about trying to avoid certain pitfalls, like vaping is a really bad thing on campus right now, among other things, and how it's not good or healthy long term. But it can be really challenging to lay out exactly why that might be the case. And so, let's look at Proverbs 4. I've got 4 verses 10 is where we're going to start here. Do I want to break this up into 2 parts? I'd like to read 4:10 all the way to 27, which again is a little bit longer chunk, but these are not the short pithy statements, but give us a little bit of an idea of, a more detailed explanation of why we should be focusing on following a particular path. So I'll go ahead and start here with verse 10. And again, this is the father talking to his son. And he says, "Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I've led you in the paths of uprightness." So here we get a little glimpse of this righteousness idea. "When you walk, your step will not be hampered. If you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of your instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of wicked, and do not walk in the way of evil." You get a little personification here. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. The instruction, the wisdom that he has provided is your life. It's kind of interesting to think about these words. Sometimes I feel this way about the whole book. And I don't just mean Proverbs, I mean the entire collection of 66 books. It's kind of like our lifeline, right? When we deal with struggles and challenges. And so here, the father wants the son to realize just how important it is to follow in the instruction that has been provided. And I think it's clear that if we aren't following that path that he's laid out, then we're in danger. We're in danger not only for ourselves, for our life, but obviously the path that we follow. When someone starts down a dangerous road, do things typically get better or worse? Yeah, a lot worse. When it came to drugs and stuff, I don't know why. My sister and I were not interested in that stuff. It wasn't very popular at the school I went to the same school that my students are at. It wasn't a very in thing. I don't know why that was. There was obviously some cigarette smoking and things but it was a very small group that I remember. But I do wonder if, for whatever reason, had I started down some weird path like that, it probably would have been a lot harder to avoid going further into worse things. I know they used to call marijuana, a gateway drug. It's probably something else now. Maybe it's just the vaping thing. But the whole idea here is once you start down the dark path, forever can it dominate your destiny, right? To quote a line from Star Wars. Same sort of idea here. So we're going to continue again. I kind of got a little sidetracked with the stumbling part here, but I think it's important to kind of think through these pieces as we go. And again, if you have a comment, please feel free to chime in. But continuing on, avoid it, do not go on, and turn away from it and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. Again, he's talking about those who are wicked. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence, but the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. We get a little bit of antithetical parallelism here, where we get to see what the righteousness are being contrasted, of course, with the wicked. And, you know, this is not a new way to consider good and evil. Like we always think of the good guys as being the bright and the shiny, you know, knight in shining armor. It's not dark armor. It's the bad guy that has the dark black armor or whatever. So, you know, it's not surprising that we're seeing this kind of language. It's been around for all of humanity. Continuing on, the way of the, verse 20, my son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ears to my sayings. Let them not escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are the life of those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech, and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward, and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. I'm sure that warning about not swerving to the right or the left is, of course, because there is what on each side, Jason? What do you say, ditch? Was that the saying? So a ditch on both sides. So I'm sure that's why we're not to swerve to the left or to the right. So, you know, that kind of concludes this chunk. And again, he's going through and giving us things to do in order to stay on that right path. So just to kind of open up to some thoughts, are there any things about this passage that bring to mind what exactly it is to be righteous? What is it entailing? Yes.
Pulling from this and saying, oh, I might be near a ditch, it's probably not that easy.
Yeah.
So training your mind, training your heart to where you can tell kind of where you're at in the road, so to speak. I mean, it's difficult. And I know raising the boys, it was not easy trying to get them to, you know, I could see things down the road for them. I'll be like, yeah, this is not good. We need to turn off. And they were like, why? Well, you just need to trust me. That's not going to work like you think. And it's because of experience.
Yeah.
So we together as a family, this congregation, we need to rely on each other in those situations. We need to be vulnerable enough to confide in each other, so that if I have something, you know, somebody else, Jenny, somebody else, can tell me, Mike, that's not a good way to go. Right? To the point to where it's not just for me to decide.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, we all recognize it's easy to say, oh, do what's right, follow the path of righteousness. And the challenge is knowing exactly what that is in a particular situation. And it certainly is easier when we're not the ones in the actual spot. It's a lot easier when you're removed, right? Third party looking at the picture, oh, I know what that person should have done in that situation. It is harder when you're in the moment, for sure, you know.
But there have been times when I've hated talking to my attorney because I'll tell him, this is what happened. He looks at me like I'm stupid. He goes, why did you do that? Well, if you follow my logic, you follow my path, you understand that. Yes, but here's where you stepped up. Way back here at the beginning. And you need those conversations. You need that, you're in the headlights, you need that little bit of shame to figure out, yes, I need to be more attentive, I need to be more alert.
Yes.
As to what life brings.
And this whole presentation, this is clearly somebody speaking to somebody younger who they've had more experiences. So naturally, they're going to be in a better position to be able to describe where your path could shake and move, and where you could deviate off course. And so, of course, that's what he's going through. He's trying to describe it, and obviously, he's giving. You'll notice he's not really super specific with any of these. He's warning, like, what things should you be looking for? In the previous passage about, don't listen to them when they say, oh, we're going to take and we'll all have one purse. What's the saying? Honor amongst thieves or something. There isn't any, or you can't really trust what dishonest people are going to, do for you when you follow along. And so, you got little hints of things like, what should you be looking for? If something sounds fishy with what you're hearing, your eyes should perk up. You should be wondering, wait a second, does this sound right? Is this the right path for me? And again, it is definitely easier when you're not in the moment. Going back to the little example I was talking before, I went ahead and I have not made that phone call. But yesterday, twice, I called the student by the name that she requested, because it just felt wrong to, she didn't say anything else. She didn't tell me what her pronoun was or anything else like that, which there was a law passed that basically says I don't have to worry about pronoun use. Now, a few years earlier, I would have been worried about accidentally using the wrong one. But again, it's weird how things change over time. But, that obviously I want to do the right thing in that situation, but, I have to kind of evaluate on the spot there, is this, do I want to risk damaging my relationship with that student by saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to call you the name on the roster. So far, I have a rapport with that student. Do I want to danger that or put it in danger because she asked me something innocent to call her by a different name? And, do I also want to risk, any drama, by doing that? I think in this particular case, I have to pull the records, but they actually keep a track of which students have had an official form signed by the parents or whatever. I have a little bit of time before I'm required to actually have had that checked. I had a student earlier in the year, and it was already done. The paperwork was finished there. But that's just a simple example of something that seems harmless, but I'm trying to make sure I don't want to make a mistake in that regard. I'm trying to think of some other examples where, does anybody have any other particular examples of something in their own experience, work, life, where they were unsure immediately what the correct choice was?
Yeah, I think it comes up for me daily, trying to apply for jobs. And you fill out a resume, you try to tailor your resume to the job, and you're like, okay, you understand that they have these ATS systems that go through and to track your resume, and you need to have certain keywords. So then, does that word actually fit? Can I force that in, or can I qualify that some way on the resume to make it look like that you have this thing? Or they have a drop-down box. How many years of experience do you have with this thing? And you're like, well, I have 7 years of experience with something ancillary to that was the same thing. They said this or this on the application, but here it has. So constantly you're questioning, your own integrity about. And I even saw a thing about resume help writing, whatever, going through all these tips. And every single comment under it was, just lie, because the company's going to lie to you. It blew me away.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. So, yeah, we want to be honest naturally, but if everyone's playing the game where they're embellishing their resume or they're embellishing their skills, you feel at a huge disadvantage if you're trying to compete.
And I think that's a pretty real-world application of what we read, in the first section, because I don't know that it's what's tempting us to become highwaymen, with our
Right.
skills drawn. Give us your
No, it's
but,
2026 problems.
You're in a world of, unrighteousness in which people do things for unrighteous gain that is at the cost of others. And what's interesting in this section to me is he goes through, he kind of lays the two paths, right? The good and the evil, the righteous and the wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And he was almost making an argument for the slippery slope of the way the path you pursue is going to take hold. So much so, I think the most interesting verse is 16. They cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. And it's like, that's the line, right? Like, how can you sleep at night having done that? Because we can't sleep well if there's something bothering us, we have anxiety. Those that are wicked are so far down that path that they can only sleep well when they've done it. And it's like this idea of, like, you better choose carefully which path you're pursuing. And hopefully that means being able to make the right decision on a resume or.
Sure. It also makes me think a little bit about our society as a whole and the things that you see kind of glorified. Again, I deal with teenagers and they can be very petty, but they're in many cases mimicking what they've seen. Some of the TV show, the housewives of whatever county or whatever there's been you see what they show in some of the, like the pettiness, the cattiness, the glee when somebody has a problem or drama that occurs. And I have to admit, I've gotten onto students when they start celebrating the downfall of a classmate. I'm not very kind sometimes. I can get pretty harsh on them because that's not good. Why would you be celebrating somebody else's downfall? And I think that has been unfortunately stoked and celebrated just in general in our society. Yes.
How important is righteousness for showing the world's tried many different ways to try to make it on their own, and surprisingly, it hasn't worked.
No, yeah. Just to piggyback off that, in my job, every year we have to redo the same training there's an ethics thing. It's most of the teachers at this point, if they've done it a couple times, click through most of it, don't read much, and it mostly doesn't change. But we call these the yearly trainings that we have to do. You get like 30 days at the beginning of the school year to go through them at your own pace. And yeah, at this point, I highly doubt that most of the teachers who've done it before are actually reading again. And of course, in theory, they at least the first time, hopefully they looked closely at those details. But we signed something that basically says whether you read, you can't use I didn't read it closely enough. You're subject to keeping to it regardless of what you know or don't. Comment or no? Okay, my apologies. Yes. To protect the corporation's interests, yeah.
Only if it benefits them. Because
Yep.
I had a guy we hired, gone through numerous technical hurdles that he had to get through, et cetera, to pass those. But he slept on the job. Fell asleep at his desk.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's nothing written about sleeping, anywhere, but
In the manual.
but that was a number. And so you can do your best, try to follow the rules, et cetera. But and this guy, I can see the knives are already out, claws, et cetera, from HR and so on. But you try your best, but sometimes you still get pulled into situations that you're going to have to do things you don't like because of, signing things like at the sign.
Mhm.
Something I belong to was it was a requirement to tell the truth or lose the certification. So you do all of that. This guy had some limits depending on the law.
Oh, no.
He was an older, not old, but an older developer,
Okay.
et cetera. Had a long list of people who had said he was great. Gave him a chance to find out if he had a physical ailment. But he said he was a runner, he was great, no problem, et cetera. So, most of his job.
Wow. And yeah, that's obvious. And now he's got a whole nother bit of problems that he's gonna have to deal with in that kind of situation. Yeah, and that's tough. And it's hard sometimes to know, exactly how to walk that line. I'm going to move on to one more small chunk of passages that deals kind of with the qualities of wicked men and kind of the calamity that comes as a result. In Proverbs 6, verses 12 through 19, I'd like to read that chunk. And then I have one passage selected near the end of the chapter I want to get to, and maybe one more anecdote regarding some things I've been challenged with just as a teacher of high school students. But let's go ahead and hop over to Proverbs 6, verses 12, again through 19. And again, I picked out some of these larger chunks because it gives us a little bit more material than just the short, pithy one statements, although there are, again, a couple of fun ones at the end we'll look at. But in chapter 6, verse 12, it's going to read, "A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech. Winks with his eyes, signals with his feet, points with his finger. With perverted heart devises evil, continually sowing discord. Therefore calamity will come upon him suddenly. In a moment he will be broken beyond healing." Stop there for just a moment. I picked this part of the reason, the crooked speech part at the beginning. Is that something that we as Christians can struggle with from time to time? I mean, there are some, obviously, we all have all sorts of vices that could potentially ensnare us. Speech, though, is one that we all participate or engage in, and I think it could be easy sometimes. I know I myself, I question all the time. Should I have said this? Should I have done this? When I'm interacting with some of my more difficult students. And it probably would not shock you to know I have 168 students on my rosters altogether. A small handful of them are not easy to deal with from time to time. I don't have any huge problems. Part of the reason I don't is I do use my tongue early on in the year to maintain order. I have a quick one when it comes to dealing with my students. I try to be as kind and courteous. This year, I haven't had any of those things that have kept me up at night. In the past, I have had times where I'm like, man, I should not have said that. It's been a couple of years, thankfully, since I've had one of those really bad ones. But because I'm always trying to build relationships too, I need my students to understand and buy in to my purpose because in the end, it's for their benefit. I know they have a test that they have to take at the end of the year, and I need them to stay engaged the whole year and not give up, not fall too far behind, that sort of thing. So I'm constantly trying to like toe this line of when they need to be given a sharp, retort or whatever from, and they can be very, fortunately, what they say doesn't bother me too much. Some of the teachers really struggle with that, I know, because they complain about it all the time. I have quite a bit of fun in my back and forths with them. But I do, that's one of those things. My speech is very important to my effectiveness. And so I have to constantly think about how to deal with the difficult students that you're going to have. And so for me, at least, that's one of the things I know I have to focus on, because if I ever if I ever lose my control over my tongue, I could do serious damage to my students, to my relationship with the students. And I know there's always the potential for that. So I have to constantly be checking myself, asking myself, are these the right things, to be saying? So I wanted to mention that passage particularly because of the reference to the speech. Obviously, he continues with several other things about, just how, their perverted heart devices, like everything they're doing is to sow discord and strife, and of course they're going to get a calamity, which is not a positive thing. You don't want calamity to be coming over you. But that's what it says will come upon them, and they won't know when. It's going to be sudden and in a moment, broken and beyond healing. Yeah. And of course, sometimes when you're the one observing the poor behavior, you almost are like, where's my popcorn bowl? I want to see it come. Like Jonah, right? He wanted to get his popcorn bowl, sit on the side waiting for, Nineveh to get its just due. And it doesn't always come when we want it. And sometimes that's because there might be remorse or a change of heart on the person who's doing it. But if there is no change of heart, it's going to come at some point. And that's, of course, the message here. This next little bit also is an interesting thing. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, and a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. That is 7 things. 6 that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination. All those are pretty awful things when you read through those. Any thoughts on those?
He that soweth discord among brethren. Sometimes a bad thing is mentioned first in a list. Sometimes it's mentioned last for emphasis. So take your pick.
Yeah. And there's several instances in the Proverbs where they, it'll start with 3 of these, yea, 4, or 6 of these. You add the extra one, which is like an extra step up of just how bad it is. That was the first bell, right? So what do we got, 4 minutes? Okay. All right. Any final thoughts on that? I'm going to skip to one final passage at the end. It's only one verse at the end, but any thoughts? Yes. Go ahead, James.
I think it's a mistake that this appears where it does in the text, either in this chapter or the prior chapters, because the text is telling his son, hear what I have to say, listen to me, give attention to it, get involved in this kind of stuff. Here's where that road's going to go. And some of those very things he talked about are in this list of things that God doesn't like. So he's telling him, God doesn't like this. Don't do it.
And from these passages, a big part of, it seems, it's more about avoiding what isn't righteous. Like being righteous is avoiding these things. It's almost like it's don't do what is wrong, and that then immediately puts you in kind of a state of being more justified, following in this path that we've laid out. Don't deviate, that sort of thing. The passage I just want to talk or read about really quickly, I think it's interesting how do the unrighteous see the righteous and vice versa. This is going to be very near the end, Proverbs 29:27. If you just hop over to that really quickly, this also will help us perhaps understand why at times we as Christians can be heavily criticized, and obviously we have to get past those issues or those criticisms and not be hindered by them. But this very short passage, very near the end of the Proverbs, an unjust man is an abomination to the righteous, but one whose way is straight is an abomination to the wicked. And again, I wanted to close with this passage because there's a little contrast there, obviously. How do we view, an unjust person? We see them as an abomination or a huge deviation, and then vice versa. If you're walking the straight path, how do the wicked see us, perhaps? Sometimes in the same way. So, any final thoughts before we close on righteousness?
We know now, as much as we never know as Christians, how much we're tested because it's out there everywhere.
Sure.
And while I would say yes, we can test for this, I'm not sure we're as cruel about it. We appreciate it different, but.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to know exactly how to deal with behavior or ideas that treat just wanting to not maybe follow in, I'll have a student, Mr. M, you're weird. And I say, thank you, I appreciate that. Or something like that. And I tell them, being weird isn't necessarily bad. If you're always afraid of following the common path, then if that common path leads to destruction, then you're just going to go right with it. And so we shouldn't probably be afraid to be the abomination to the wicked. Okay, it's easy, of course, because I think that there's a part of us as humans, we just want to be accepted by everybody. There's this just kind of innateness. It avoids conflict unless you just enjoy it for some reason. No matter what peer group or what environment you find yourself in, you're going to want to kind of move to that section and or that kind of mentality. And so this is just letting us know we shouldn't be surprised about being perceived as an abomination. And obviously, there's going to be times where we don't like what we see in the world. And fortunately, this isn't our home. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate that. And that'll conclude class.